It's 2016. Our new neighbors invite our family over for our nighttime barbecue. My mom and my dad and my sister and I met in their backyard at like 8 o'clock. This is the first time that I personally met them. It's just a husband and wife and a teenage boy. I quickly learned the boy's name is Jeremy. The husband seems to be the nicest of them all. There's something called about the wife, and the son Jeremy seems to have some kind of mental or social issues because he won't talk at all. He constantly looks all over the place, and he seems to be really sad or gloomy. I also catch him staring at me a few times. Each time, I grow increasingly uncomfortable around him and try even harder not to look at him anymore. After eating a burger and hot dogs each, our parents pretty much talked to his parents. I waited a little bit before sneaking back to our house because I was bored and uncomfortable. The next day I walked to school, since I lived 2 blocks away from the high school. I turned my head around a few hours after passing our neighbor's house and see someone jump behind a tree as if to be hiding. I turned back in front of me and started to walk faster. I get to the last block before the school and turn around again. This time, I see the same person hiding in a bush in front of someone's house. It's Jeremy. I can tell by his long hair, and he's looking right at me. I walk as fast as I can without running, and make it to the school safely a minute later. When I got home that day and told my parents, and they go over and talk to the neighbors. When my parents come back to talk to me, I learned from them that Jeremy is apparently not like the other kids. According to his parents word for word, that also seemed to be enough explanation for my parents to tell me to just ignore him, as if him following me to school wasn't an insanely creepy thing to do. Later on, I go outside to sit on the patio and do my homework, and just as Jeremy and his creepiness come to mind, I turn to look at the neighboring house, up at the only window that overlooks our back. And there he is. Jeremy is sitting at that window looking at me, but as he notices me, he quickly hides. I ran inside and told my parents, and they once again quoted what his parents said and told me not to worry about him. Later that night, after texting friends and whatnot in bed, I finally put my phone down on the desk and rolled on my site to go to sleep. A certain amount of time that I can't remember passes before I hear a click at my window, and then suddenly, my window slides open. Without even knowing who's there, I scream at the top of my lungs, and soon my parents come rushing inside, all while I'm pressing up against the wall in shock as someone climbs through my window into my room. My parents turn on the lights, revealing Jeremy holding a large kitchen knife. Everyone screams, including my father, as he comes and grabs me to pull me out of the room. The 4 of us all rushed to the neighbor's house to tell them. The man next door leads us into our own house and grabs his son. When he finds him in the living room, he snatches the knife from his hands and tugs him out of the house. My dad sends all of us inside as he stays outside screaming at the man next door. Moments later, he comes back inside and calls the police to get a restraining order. My dad promised those neighbors a living hell if they were not moved out by the next week. The police come and take Jeremy away, probably to some kind of place for people with mental disabilities, not a regular jail. Moving along to a week later, Jeremy didn't stay in that house anymore. We don't know where he stays now, but we've never seen him since. My early days after graduating college, I didn't have a lot of money, so I had to rent an apartment with someone else who I had never met before. He'd become my roommate, and his name was Randall. At first, he seemed easy enough to get along with. He didn't talk too much, but he had a heavy Spanish accent. The room I'd be getting was already furnished, and that was one of the appealing factors to this apartment. It had a twin-sized bed tucked in the corner, a nice-sized dresser, a closet, and a TV stand in another corner of the room. There were a bunch of stuffed animals sitting on the dresser, though which I found a bit odd, most notably, a big teddy bear facing the bed. When I asked Randall about the stuffed animals, he gave a really loud laugh and said his room had the same thing. He recommended I leave them be as to show respect to the landlord. I didn't really talk to Randall much that first day. Other than that, I spent most of my time unpacking my clothes and supplies and setting up my TV. When I was laying in bed watching TV that night, I thought I heard something. It was a very brief noise, but it was definitely audible, and it sounded like some kind of small electronic component. I chalked it up to being a house noise and continued my show. The next day, Randall wasn't home all day. I didn't know if or where he worked, but I just assumed he was at work. That night when I was in my room watching TV, I heard the front door open and Randall walk through the hall to his room before shutting the door. A little later, I was getting changed into my pajamas when I heard the same sound from the night before. This time, without the TV noise in the background, so I heard him much clearer. It was definitely some kind of electronic device, but I didn't know what or where. It still didn't seem like a big deal, so I got into my bed and started reading my current book, then went to sleep. The next day I saw Randall when I came home after work, and he asked me what book I was reading. At first, I didn't get the question, but then he said he was talking about the book that I was reading in my room. I looked at him in silence of confusion. I asked him how he knew I was reading a book, and he said in his heavy Spanish accent that he had to go into my room just to take something out that he left in there, and that's when he noticed the book. I asked him nicely not to go into my room anymore. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lock on the door, so I couldn't stop him when I wasn't home. That night, when I grabbed my book from under my bed, I stopped and wondered, how would he see my book if I had it under my bed? Thinking about this now creeped me out, and I was in no mood to read anymore. I looked around the room as I thought to myself. Then I noticed that big teddy bear on the dresser again. Now it was angled so perfectly to face me in the bed. Then I had a scary thought. I stood up and walked over to the bear, grabbed it, and looked closely into its eyes. I felt my heart skip a beat when I realized there was a camera in one of the eye holes. I threw the thing into the corner of the room and went to Randall's door and tried opening it. His door apparently had a lock because it wouldn't open, but I knew he was in there. I pounded on the door, screaming his name, but he wouldn't answer. I saw the light sneaking in through the bottom of the door go dark as I assumed he turned off the light. I went back to my room and called the landlord. I explained everything and told him I'm leaving right now, and I had a valid reason to void the contracts. I packed a little amount of things I brought into my car and left that same night, never looking back. The landlord surprisingly never even came to me to collect the money for those few days I was there. Ever since that night, I have a phobia of stuffed bears, like I always have to turn them away so that they're not facing me. The story was by far the scariest thing to ever happen in my life. I went to a bar with my friends on a Saturday night. As we usually did, we all got decently intoxicated. The night became a complete blur. About an hour after showing up to the bar, I vaguely remembered talking to a few guys that came up to me. I didn't remember anything out of the ordinary though. I lived walking distance to the bar we were at that night, so I guess when I got tired or bored I left. And I do remember walking to my house that night. I think it was when I was starting to sober up a little bit. We always used to leave a key under a flower pot in our stoop. I always used that key on nights like this, so that I wouldn't have to walk around with my keys on me while I'm drunk. I got home, locked the door behind me, and went straight to my room to fall into my bed. I skipped changing into pajamas and brushing my teeth and whatnot. I did lay there awake with my phone in my hands, texting my friends, seeing if they were still there and making sure they got home okay though. Suddenly I heard the front door open downstairs. The only thing I was thinking was that it could be my little brother getting home, since he usually got home really late. My best friend texted back, asking how I got away from the guy. I replied back, "What guy?" She said, "The creep that wouldn't stop talking to me at the bar." The The bar was such a blur that I didn't remember which specific guy she could be talking about. I heard some noises downstairs. I assumed my brother was making a late-night snack in the kitchen, and I heard walking up the stairs. My best friend texted me again, saying she saw him leave the bar right after me. Now I was still decently drunk, but still, I was starting to become suspicious. Steps came up the stairs outside and stopped outside my door. Then the door quietly opened. It was dark outside of the room too, so I couldn't see who was standing at my door. I said my brother's name, and then the door shut. But I didn't hear whoever it was walk away. So I was led to believe they were standing outside my door. I immediately texted my brother, asking if it was him. Surprisingly, he texted back right away saying, "What, me? Why do you keep opening the front door?" We live with our mom. She's the only other person in the house, but she was away for the week, so I didn't know what to think, other than it was an intruder. I called the cops without telling my brother, and hearing 911, "What's your emergency?" for the first time in my life, really made the situation seem that much more severe. I described what I believed to be a break-in, and as I was on the phone, I leaned over, turned on my bedroom lamp. As the room went from a dark to bright, I saw a man standing in the corner of the room by the door. I screamed and shrieked while still on the line with the 911 operator, who kept asking, "What's wrong?" The man in the corner opened the door and fled the scene. I heard him run out the front door. I stayed on the line with the operator, who advised me every move I should make until a cop car actually showed up. I was still intoxicated, so the info I gave on the police report was probably not the most accurate, but I described the man to be mid-20s, looking stocky, full beard, and a short haircut. One of the two officers then lifted his hand, revealing a key he was holding, and said he found that in the front door lock. It was the spare key that we kept under the flower pot. The intruder used it to get in, meaning he followed me home and watched me take the key from under the pot. The officer told me to rest assured he'd be patrolling close around the area all night, and advised my brother and I to keep our doors locked and find a new hiding spot for the key. The next day, besides my hangover, I felt relieved. I told my friends about what happened, and they described everything in detail. That some creepy-looking guy in the bar had been following me all night, trying to talk to me every chance he got. And somehow, I was oblivious to it. I took a long break to go to bars, and we don't hide a key outside anymore. This story is a dark one. All of the stories are pretty much messed up in their own way, but this one is probably the worst story, so stay tuned. For a little context, I didn't have a lot of stability or safety as a child. My biological father is a sexual predator and assaulted my older sister when she was a child, so I never got to meet him until I was 10 years old. Every time I lived with my mom, she would take off for months at a time and leave me alone in her house. I was only 8 years old at the time. I periodically lived with my aunt, but she was an alcoholic and had raised me for most of my childhood in a fundamentalist Mormon cult. But every time I went to live with my mom, she would leave me, and I was always hungry and dirty. So I figured it was best to just stay with my aunt. Well, fast forward to when I'm 16 years old, and my aunt got drunk and blacked out in the hallway of her house. After I called 911, my dad and stepmom had picked me up from the hospital, and they decided it was best that I lived with them. My dad made me really uncomfortable, but I still loved him, and I thought he was a changed man, and I did adore my stepmom. I reluctantly said yes, because I desperately didn't want to go back to my mom's, and I couldn't handle being with my aunt anymore. One thing I have to point out that I didn't realize at the time, I had called my boyfriend Dylan and our mutual friend Mike to come with me to the hospital. It was like a weight lifted off my chest when Dylan showed up, and he managed to cheer me up after finding out my aunt was okay. But my dad, for reasons I would later find out, was incredibly jealous of Dylan. I remember how stiff he looked, sitting across from us in the hospital, and the angry look he had on his face watching Dylan and I. After Dylan left, my dad had told me,
"I'm not happy with you, and I really don't like that you have a boyfriend."
I took it at the time as him just being an overprotective dad. My instincts were telling me otherwise, but I ignored them because I didn't have any parents in my life that would protect me. So I just told myself to trust him because it was the only option I had at the time. So time went by and everything was amazing. Mostly because my stepmom was really wonderful and my dad had worked so much that I went months without seeing him. I was flourishing and I had a lot of friends. I was able to express myself for the first time and not to sound conceited or full of myself. But I grew up to be very pretty, which drew in some evil men into my life, including my own father. I finally had confidence for the first time in my life, and my life for the first time felt normal. It felt like heaven until my dad came home. I had brought over a guy friend. We weren't even dating, and my dad expressed the same jealousy as he did with my ex Dylan. Again, I dismissed it, but my dad was growing increasingly obsessive, and I began to feel as though he was watching my every move. I ended up dating a guy named Luke. He was my first love. When my dad found out about this, he sat down with me one day and said something along the lines of,
"You're being sexually active out of wedlock."
I don't know how he knew that, or if he had just assumed.
"Your stepmom's only slept with her ex-husband, and me. And as a Mormon family, that's what's expected of a woman."
Luke and I had dated for about 4 months, and he ended up cheating on me and then breaking up with me. And naturally, I was heartbroken. I don't know what it was about that event, but my dad sensed my vulnerability and leaped right into it. The first weird thing I noticed was I woke up one day and my iPod was missing. I ended up finding the broken case in my closet, but no iPod. The thing about that iPod is not only did I have all of the music I loved, but also some naked photos of me as well. And it did not have a passcode to get in. I didn't want to think that my dad took it, so I brushed it off yet again. A few days later, things increasingly became more unusual and more dangerous for me. I changed my hair, and it may seem weird, but my sister later told me that it seemed like he was more attracted to me after that, and also seeing me in such a vulnerable state since the assault happened a few days later. I was laying on the couch, still pretty heartbroken over Luke, and my dad came downstairs and sat on the couch next to me. And he then started rubbing my back, which maybe wouldn't be too weird, but he had started rubbing my back under my shirt. I don't think my brain could process what was happening, so I froze up, almost into a dreamlike state. My stepmom came into the room, and he pulled his hand quickly out of my shirt. I don't know how, but she didn't notice. The next morning, my dad came into my room to wake me up for school. When he woke me up, I noticed that the door was cracked. Everyone except for him and I were still asleep. He started off by stroking my cheek, and then he climbed on top of me and kissed me on the lips a few times, then telling me,
"This is how I used to kiss you as a baby. Is this okay?"
I was honestly terrified, and I just said yes. He then started rubbing the inside of my pants slightly below my stomach, then up my shirt, and even proceeded to lift up my shirt and look at me. I think I went into shock because I didn't move. I've always been really skinny, and at 16, I was slightly underweight, and my dad was a big guy. So I knew I had no chance of fighting him off, and I was scared he would hurt me or my stepmom if I screamed. I then went into survival mode. It went on for what seemed like an eternity. After it was over, he drove me to school and to keep myself safe. I just pretended like everything was okay, but once I had gone to school, I had run away and called my mom to come get me. She seemed irritated and didn't even believe me. So she called my sister to drive down from Wyoming to Utah to come pick me up. While I waited for her, my stepmom found me. I got into her car and she asked what happened. Then she said, "Your dad told me that you might have taken his cuddling the wrong way." When I told her in detail what had happened, She said that there wasn't anything unusual about that, and it wasn't even weird that he did it. I knew at that moment that no one there had my back, and I had to get out before things escalated even more. Unfortunately, though, I would go on to be sexually assaulted and raped by 4 men after him. I was raped 2 months later by a 30-year-old man at the party. And after that happened, I had messaged my dad, telling him that he paved the pathway for this to happen. No one would believe me, so I learned to stay quiet about everything that happened to me, and I told him that I forgave him. Not for him, but for me. So Chris, my biological father, if you're listening, you nor any of the other men that have done this to me have broken me. I am not a victim, I'm a victor. You never got to watch me fall in love with my husband, and I have children that you'll never meet. Your life is falling apart, and me, I'm better than okay. And I've promised myself that I'll never let another man hurt me like that ever again. The story took place from the time that I was 11 to 16 years old. My parents had gotten a divorce when I was 9, and my little sister was 6. We ended up moving to the other side of town to a little house that my mom had rented. My mom got lonely, so she decided to try dating. She began dating this man named Matt. They dated for about a year until my mom discovered that he was cheating on her. Little did she know that wouldn't be the end of Matt. When they were together, he would show abusive tendencies. He would commonly scream at me and my little sister. I was only 10 at the time that this happened, so I became very afraid of him. Once my mom kicked him out, he began stalking us who had parked in front of our house and just sat there all night. I don't know what he did in the car all night, but I would stare at that car for hours until I fell asleep. And then the next day, he would be gone. One time when I was 13, he got ballsy and came to our door. He would just stand there all night until like 5 minutes before my mom got home. He would also go around the house and knock on all of the windows. I once woke up in the middle of the night to my little sister screaming. I ran to her room and she was crying in her bed. She said that Matt was outside her window. I wasn't getting the proper amount of sleep that I should have because I was really scared that he was going to break in. I actually told my dad about it on our next visit, and he gave me a phone, and he said to call him if he came back. And sure enough, he came back, knocking on my bedroom window. I called my dad, and he rushed right over, cursing Matt out. Look, I'm going to tell you this once. If you don't leave my kids alone, I'm calling the cops on your fucking sorry ass. Matt did leave us alone for about 2 weeks, but then he came back. My 14th birthday had just passed by this point, and he decided to leave me a little birthday gift right outside my bedroom window. It was a fucking dildo. I was disgusted. I was a child. I told my mom about this, and we went to get trained on how to use a gun. She told me if he came back to threaten him with the gun. He did come back, and I did indeed threaten him with the gun, and he never showed up again after that, but he did begin to stalk me and my mom on our social media. What the hell's wrong with this guy? It had been about 4 years since he and her dated. Why was he still stalking us? I began to have night terrors of him breaking into our house and actually kidnapping me and my sister. It got so bad to the point that I had to go to therapy over it. When I was 16, the stalking on social media stopped entirely. No new fake accounts, no nothing. I guess they found someone else to stalk. My mother is now happily married to another man named Danny, and he's the sweetest stepdad ever. I'm 23 years old now, and I really hope to never come across as Matt again. What a psycho he was. I was 20 at the time this incident occurred, and I'm a female. I lived in Alberta, Canada, at the time when I was a college student. I was used to living in a city environment, so I always considered myself to be pretty street smart. I went about my life as normal, but one day, that all changed. I was on every social media that you can think of, including Twitter. I wasn't on it much, but I had an account anyway. One day, my sister had called me back home in Quebec, and I immediately knew that something was wrong. She demanded to know where I was, which confused me, but I told her I was at home, and I asked her what was going on. It was the weekend that I wasn't at work or school, so I had some rare time to myself. She told me that she didn't know how to tell me this, but there was a video of me circulating on Twitter, and that she needed me to know. I asked her what she meant, and she said she would send me the link, and that she was so sorry. I was anxious now, and I asked her to please tell me what the hell's going on. She told me that she wanted to video call me, which I agreed to, and we hung up so we could do that. When I answered, she looked like she had been crying, and her eyes were frantic. I asked her again to please tell me what the hell was going on, and what she meant that a video of me was circulating. She told me that basically there was this Twitter page called Canada Creep. She said it was a page dedicated to posting photos and videos of women without their consent, and that often these messages and videos were inappropriate, close subs of women's breasts and butts. My blood ran cold, and I felt sick. My sister had told me that she had heard about the page, but never thought much of it, since sadly, a lot of creeps do that sort of thing. However, she told me that someone had reached out to her and told her I was on it. This person was on the page, trying to get it taken down, and it recognized me. I needed to see how bad it was, so when my sister sent me the link, I looked. I recognized myself walking down the street from behind. I was wearing a long sleeve shirt and jeans. The footage followed me, zooming in on my ass before suddenly switching to the front of me. He must have got ahead of me somehow and edited 2 clips together. My top wasn't low cut at all, but even if it was, no one deserves to be perved on. The camera showed my full face in the second half, and then zoomed in on my chest area as I walked. The clip wasn't very long, but it wasn't short either. It made me burst into tears to know that someone had been filming me, and that it was now online, all for a bunch of perverts to thirst over. I recognized the outfit, and the video must have been taken just a few weeks before, within the same month I discovered it. I recognized where I was, and I hadn't felt like anyone was watching me or filming me. I was shaking as I racked my brain around it. How could I have not noticed someone was filming me, especially from the front? Wouldn't I have seen a man waving his phone at me? I couldn't stop crying, and my sister kept telling me how she was so sorry, and she began crying too. The creep captioned it was something I don't want to share, just in case anyone tries to find me, but it made me sick because it was something so gross and dehumanizing. One of my roommates must have heard me because she knocked on my door, and I told her she could come in. I ended up telling her everything, and she tried to console me. She said that she had no idea that a page like that existed, but I ended up finding out that some people at our college were aware of it. Some people were actually trying to get it taken down. I don't want to give any information about my identity because I'm honestly still paranoid that some pariahs from that page could still find me somehow. But I'm going to be sharing some links the Southern Cannibal can put in the description if he decides to use the story, just for anyone who might want to read about it. Anyway, I tried reporting the video, but Twitter didn't take it down. The page had thousands of followers, and I don't know if all of them were creeps, or maybe it was people trying to keep tabs to close it down. The man was eventually caught, but it didn't erase all the stress he had caused. I feel like I was one of the lucky ones, because so many other women were victims of upskirting, and I can't even imagine how violating that would feel. I feel violated enough having this man zoom in on my chest and fully covered behind, knowing a bunch of perverts lusting over it. Never mind the world seeing my underwear. To this day, I feel uncomfortable and on high alert in public, and I struggle taking public transport, as I was near public transport when he got footage of me. It's been several years now, but I still feel so angry. This complete stranger has destroyed my trust in the world, and I'll never get it back. I want to start off by saying that the story took place when I was a different person than who I am now. For context, I was a bad drug addict for about 10 years. I'm not proud, but I did work as an escort on the side. I had met guys who treated me decently. Then there were the ones who weren't so nice. Anyway, one night when I was home, I received a call from my boss, saying a customer, who we'll call Mike, came in yelling, saying that I hit his car. Mind you, I didn't even have a car. After settling that, I must admit that business was slow, and that my regulars just weren't able to help. Mike continued to call and text. So after a while, I agreed on seeing him. He would always come so late, and getting him to leave was a whole nother issue. After that, I would have regulars over, and would look down my street, and who do you think was there? Yeah, Mike. No one had asked him to be there. After my day left, he came banging on the door, asking who that was, and he then threatened me with a statement that made me scared as hell.
You better be glad that he left.
And when I asked why, he then said to me,
I can make your life a living hell.
Little did I know, he was serious. To add further content, the stuff that he wanted was insanely odd. Well, to me anyways, he insisted on me kissing him with my eyes completely open, and never used terms of endearment. One time I called him babe, and he blew up saying that's a word strippers use for people who don't care about anything. Every day after that, it was constant messages, asking when we could meet, and it even got so bad that he tried to find my parents' number to try and talk them into admitting me. Thank God they didn't listen. He then turned up after a couple of days without talking to him, and he made me a shrine like on my trailer steps. A lighter, a cigarette, anything he could use to try and make me feel bad for him. Finally, I'd had enough, so I couldn't handle the constant harassment. I had asked my boss to ban him from the club. Fortunately for me, my boss said yes. So if my story doesn't seem scary enough, well, I'm getting ready to go right there. One night after work, he had sat in the park, close to my trailer. He had apparently called my parents, saying how he couldn't live without me, as well as all the gray memories we've shared in the park. I eventually got fed up, and I told him to stop bothering my parents with this nonsense, and that I never wanted to see him again or a smelly car. He then hung up, but something told me that I got off way too easy. So about 2 nights later, I had fallen asleep watching a movie, and all of a sudden, I woke up to the smell of fire. I then looked over to see my wall of curtains were on fire. I was shocked, and I thought I was dreaming about it. I then ran out, no clothes whatsoever. I screamed for help, and my neighbors called 911. The fire was eventually put out a couple of weeks later. The fire department told me that it seemed like it was a short from the AC. Funny thing is, a few weeks later, Mr. Mike had admitted to another friend of mine that he felt like he had no choice but to do it. Now, I had no evidence it was him. Just here to say, but Mike, you best damn believe you did it, and you almost killed me. I hope terrible things happen to you. You truly deserve it. Hey friends, I hope you all enjoyed these stories. If you ever want to submit your own stories, then you can send us. Check the description for the details. See you next time.